this press conference with the U.S. Vice President JD Vance there, and we are going to get into all of it with our correspondents now. Mohammed Val, he is in Tehran. Dominic Kane is live for us in Berlin, and my colleague Cyril Vanier is in Bergenstock in Switzerland. But first, we go to our chief U.S. correspondent, Alan Fisher, who is at the White House there. Alan, lots to dissect there from the Vice President. What stood out to you?
Well, it boils down to a few things. First of all, the criticism that Donald Trump has received from Republicans, from Donald Trump's supporters about the deal that he has done. He himself has addressed that on social media this morning. JD Vance was very clear. Does anyone really think that Donald Trump would sign a deal that would be bad for the American people, and that people have to have faith in him as they work through this process? This memorandum of understanding, he said, is effectively a framework, and they will build from that over the next 60 days to get a deal. But any deal is contingent on Iran effectively behaving like a normal country, as he sees it. He says if they do that, then there will be benefits flowing to them, and only then will be the benefits flowing to them. He also talked about how there could be investment in Iran if people start to realize that they are behaving like a normal country. Immediately, the Strait of Hormuz is open. He says more than 100 million barrels of oil have passed through there since the agreement was signed. And also the US has started to ease the blockade with ships coming in and out of the Iranian ports. He says there is criticism, and he understands that, but he says it's got to be worth trying to make sure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, and they have that agreement in the Memorandum of Understanding. What we want is a change in their behaviour. And he reminded the Iranians, we still have the leverage, we still have the mechanism. They could reimpose the blockade, they could go back to military action, something that the President has said when he was in France on Wednesday, something Pete Hegseth has said in the last few hours. So JD Vance has made it clear that he thinks that this is a good deal, that there's a lot of talk to be done, but he thinks that the Iranians, under their new leadership, realizes the leverage that the United States has, and they're able to put that in force if Iran doesn't follow through with the agreements that they've made in the Memorandum of Understanding and then in the final agreement itself.
Yeah, obviously much more to discuss with the 60-day in these next 60 days to get to the final agreement, and obviously a sales job to do with the American people. Let's head over to Tehran now and speak to Mohammed Val. So, Mohammed, lots of confusion here about this whole Switzerland situation, who's going, who's not going. Are the Iranians planning to send a delegation? And if they are, when might they get there?
Well, until now, we don't have an official confirmation about this. We don't know whether they will send a delegation or not, but the understanding and the memorandum of understanding itself stipulates that there will be negotiations and that they will start immediately after the signing. The signing has now taken place. So we can only assume that there will be an Iranian delegation going to those talks, but we don't have any announcement as to when and who is going. The understanding is that the speaker, the parliament speaker, Mohammed Baqir Ghalibaf, and the foreign minister, along with other high-ranking officials, will be with the ones to lead those talks. But until now, it's just consultations going on, as we've been told, but no decision has yet been taken.
All right, let's go over to Bergenstock, the venue of the talks that were supposed to start on Friday. Again, lots of things up in the air. Cyril Vanier is there for us. So, Cyril, pretty beautiful place that you're in to sit and wait for a summit that may or may not be taking place. What do we know at this stage? Who's going? Who's not going? What details do we have, if any?
Absolutely, Scott. Look, this place was chosen not because it's beautiful, but because it offers a pretty unique venue for potential high-level talks. I'll give you a quick look at where this is supposed to happen, still supposed to happen, although we don't know when, and then I'll tell you what has changed. So behind me, behind this lake is Bergenstock, right? And at the very top of that mountain, now if you look, you'll see two rectangular buildings. Now that is the hotel resort of Bergenstock that has been used for precisely this kind of thing several times in the past. It is a resort that is prized, we are told, by celebrities and film stars, but occasionally you will have some very important diplomacy that takes place there. Notably, 2 years ago, Ukrainian Peace Summit, Ukraine-Russia Peace Summit, dozens of heads of state were there. And what it does is it offers discretion and it offers security. There is only one road that leads up to that building. It is, I am told, a winding road. And the last time we had Ukraine peace talks of any significance there was a policeman at every bend of that mountain road. Now, that's the setting and that's why it's been chosen. And up until a few moments ago, we believed that negotiations would take place on Friday for sure, because this is what had been announced. And we expected that there would be 4 delegations, the United States and Iran, of course, but also the lead mediator between them, who has been Pakistan, and the supporting mediator, who has been Qatar. So that would be 4 countries, 4 delegations expected there tomorrow. Everything started to change, and I would say unravel at least somewhat in the last 90 minutes or so, when Pakistan deleted part of a tweet that it had previously posted. And we found out that the Pakistani, you reported on this, the Pakistani Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, would not be showing up on Friday. That, of course, if you have the lead mediator, not showing up, that throws everything in question. The Iranians have said that their participation is uncertain. So what about the Americans? Well, the U.S. Vice President JD Vance, you took it live, has just said, his quote is, "I will be leading the technical talks this weekend." So what does that mean? It sounds like it's not happening on Friday. In reality, for the U.S. Vice President to be here by tomorrow, it's already 6 p.m. local time, thereabouts, he would need to be leaving now. I think he'd know if he were leaving. We can't completely rule it out. Up until 24 hours ago, Donald Trump himself was not ruling out attending. JD Vance has not ruled out attending, even tomorrow. But the indication seems to me that they are aiming for this weekend, and that the U.S. Vice President, if we take him at his word, would be in attendance.
All right. Let's go back to Tehran here. I want to talk about the Strait of Hormuz and what exactly is happening there, what exactly is passing through that strait, because now it is open. But, Mohammed Val, I mean, are there likely to be fees or tolls after this 60-day negotiation period ends? Because at the moment, there's supposed to be no tolls. But obviously, the future of that strait is still very much uncertain. And I wonder what the Iranians are saying about that.
Well, they have been repeating that definitely there will be fees collected by Iran in exchange for services, including the safety of the passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, and maybe the constant observation of if there are any remaining mines or things like that. So the Iranians have been saying this since the beginning of this war, and they have reiterated it just yesterday. The Parliament Speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, made it clear that this is the intention of Iran after the 60 days of talks. Of course, there is an engagement in the memorandum of understanding that there will be no tolls, no collection of fees in the 60 days. But the Iranians apparently are hoping to get that concession from the Americans, the approval by the Americans that the Iranians will be taking care of the Strait of Hormuz somehow jointly with the Omanis. And there has been a lot of talk about that, and that's the hope here in Iran. And they seem to be confident. They seem to be confident that they will have that.
All right, Alan Fisher, I think that the U.S. Vice President said that there were, if my notes are correct, 12 plus ships that had gotten through the U.S. blockade thus far. There are obviously Iranians letting through ships, not shooting at them, is what he said. What more do we know about this U.S. naval blockade and how this is going to work over the next 30, 60 days? And also the U.S. forces that are in that area. Obviously, today is day 1 of this 60-day period, so clearly there's not going to be any movement. But have the Americans said anything, or did the vice president there get any questions about any kind of plans to withdraw troops or withdraw hardware from the region?
No, he hasn't said anything of that, and he certainly didn't get any questions about it. Donald Trump did on Wednesday, and he said that they would look at scaling back, which is probably the way that the military will do it. They won't pull everything back all at once. They will keep ships in place. So if there is any breaches, and JD Vance said that there is likely to be breaches, it said if there were, it didn't. Let me clarify. He did not say there were likely to be breaches. What he said was if there were breaches, they would like to deal with it diplomatically. But obviously, they retain the ability to put in place the blockade again. Now, the Iranians have said that it didn't really have that much impact. The Americans believe it was hugely important in getting the Iranians to agree to a deal. There will be a gradual withdrawing of forces. That is built into the agreement. But clearly, they're not going to pull every single service person they have in the Middle East out of that region at the moment. There's much more than they would have there normally, but they do have a number of bases, including the home of the 5th Fleet. All of those are in the region, so they can move that back as quickly as they want. They continue to say, we have leverage, we can put that in place, and if Iran doesn't follow through, then there will be consequences. But they believe that the Iranians are negotiating in good faith, even though JD Vance said there obviously is some upset at the top of the Iranian leadership, and that has led, he says, partly to the confusion about when the talks will start, who will go from Iran, who will be there for the beginning of the talks. But he suggests that America still has the ability to restart the blockade and take even further action if they feel that is necessary, if they feel that Iran is not living up to the stages of the memorandum of understanding and then the final deal itself.
All right, Al Jazeera's chief U.S. correspondent Alan Fisher for us there on the North Lawn of the White House. Alan, thank you. I want to talk about the sanctions right now. The European Union's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, says the EU is, quote, not quite there yet on the question of lifting its sanctions on Iran. Dominic Kane is live for us in Brussels with more on that. So, Dominic, what more does the EU need to see in order to lift the sanctions here on the Iranians?
Well, Kaja Kallas was speaking on her way into the summit, which is now underway. And she spoke very clearly. She delineated between the types of sanctions that currently exist. She did refer to the sanctions insofar as Iran's nuclear program are concerned, insofar as the human rights situation in Iran is concerned, and then sanctions regarding the passage of ships in the Strait of Hormuz and how those are concerned. She very clearly said that the human rights situation in Iran is such that sanctions imposed on Iran because of the human rights situation are not in question, that they will remain in place. But she then said, and predicated this, based this on the memorandum of understanding, on the prospect of a successful conclusion to talks, very clearly delineating, saying, well, the member states can talk about this, which pretty much suggests that the Europeans are prepared to fall into line with what the United States has done if there is a positive conclusion.
All right, Al Jazeera's Dominic Kane for us there in Brussels. Dominic, thank you. Let's go back to Bergenstock now, where Cyril Vanier is standing by for us. Cyril, I just want to pick up on the conversation we were having before. Obviously, we're having to kind of read the tea leaves here about what may or may not be happening over the next couple of days. But can you just describe for us, I mean, what are you seeing there in terms of security? Is there heavy police presence? I mean, are there helicopters in the sky? Is there anything to indicate that there is going to be some high-level people coming into this area over the next couple of days?
Yeah, Scott, there are some indications, and the indications aren't so much the security. Most of that security we're not privy to, because as I told you earlier, it's just that one winding road up the mountain. So the whole beauty of it from the perspective of the Swiss authorities and even the negotiating parties is that all of this is hidden from public view, right? And very easy to secure without requiring a massive police or security or special forces presence. Now, I do want to bring in our guest, Jean-Marc Ricli. He's the head of Global and Emerging Risk at the Geneva Center for Security Policy, and he's following these negotiations as we are. Jean-Marc, the question I had for you, JD Vance, the U.S. Vice President, wondering whether or not he's going to come this weekend. Does it matter? Does it matter whether you have the political heavyweights that are involved? So in this case, it might be JD Vance, and his opposite number leading the Iranian negotiating team has been the Iranian Speaker of Parliament, Mohammad Bahar Ghalibaf. Does it matter if they're there? Does it change how the negotiation is conducted?
Well, it does matter at the beginning because it sends a signal that the two heavyweights of the governments are actually taking this negotiation seriously, and that also shows some kind of commitment. Of course, then what happens is that you have teams that are negotiating. They have already started to probably to draft a proposal to define in a negotiation position. So it does matter because it sends a good signal that they are taking it seriously.
What's the main order of business? Let's assume JD Vance does come. Let's assume Iran sends a fuller delegation. What's the first thing they talk about?
Well, it's difficult to say, but I think in any negotiation, what you are starting to do is to talk about a roadmap. Okay, what are the items that you want to put on for negotiation? So that's the MOU, and now it's about working out the details. And in a negotiation, you also put some timelines and some deadlines. And then normally, what you do, you state your position, and in any negotiation, you're starting with normally quite high position, because the whole idea of negotiation is then you have to give back. Vice President JD Vance said Iran has no cards. I would dispute this. It's about leverage. Now, how you create leverage?
Jean-Marc Hickley, Head of Global and Emerging Risk at the Geneva Center for Security Policy. Thank you very much. We'll speak to you again. Scott, over to you in Doha.
All right, thank you, Cyril. All right, Fouad Izzadi is a professor at the University of Tehran. And from London is Sultan Barakat, professor of public policy at Hamad bin Khalifa University. Fouad, first for you over there in Tehran. Can you just describe for us how this deal is being received in Tehran right now? It seems like the U.S. Vice President indicated that this has caused a bit of a division in Iranian society. What's your take on that?
I think he is right. There are some people who want to make sure that the U.S. doesn't attack Iran again, and they think that this agreement will result in the country seeing peace. We have others who also want to see peace, but they don't believe that Trump is ready for peace. So there are people who look at the history of U.S. attacks on Iran. They remember that Iran was attacked 2 times in the middle of negotiations, and they are doubtful that you're going to have Trump behaving properly. They believe that the cost that the United States should have paid is not that much in terms of number of American casualties or the economic cost. The fact that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be open is going to lower that pressure on Trump, and people feel that sooner or later he may want to basically follow Netanyahu's lead again. We remember that the Israeli lobby was pushing for this war, and they're quite powerful in the United States.
Professor Barakat, over to you in London. I want to ask you about that U.S.-Israeli relationship and whether or not this gulf that we are seeing starting to open up between Washington and the Israelis is enough to fundamentally change the relationship between Washington and Israel in the future. It seems like the vice president today, the president yesterday, used some pretty stern language to describe what the Israelis are doing and what they need to do.
I don't think it will have a long-term effect on the nature of the relationship between Israel and the United States, the organic relationship. But I think what Trump has concluded is what many other presidents before him concluded, that Israel is extremely stubborn about putting its interests first, even when it is working against the interests of the United States. And you remember what the conclusions Biden reached, and before him Carter and many others. But I think the real issue here, which, if you allow me, has been mixed throughout the coverage over the last couple of hours, is the need for a ceremony, a signing ceremony, and the negotiations. What was talked about originally was a signing ceremony, which everyone knows Trump loves signing ceremonies in order to gain a lot of political capital very quickly. And that is what is now in question. I think the negotiations probably will continue, and the agenda for that negotiation has been worked out in much detail around the nuclear issue, around the Strait of Hormuz, around the development package for Iran. And for each of these, there are different actors who need to meet and talk through the details. For example, the assistance for the reconstruction and the recovery of Iran is mostly going to be the Gulf states, as is the Strait of Hormuz. The agreement, it sounds as if they're going to reach to a regional mechanism in which the sovereignty of Iran and Oman and maybe their sovereignty over the waters are going to be respected. But within that, there will be a mechanism that allows particularly commercial shipments, to continue uninterrupted. So there are a lot of issues to be discussed. The ceremony itself, I don't think it's necessary anymore because Iran mistrusts the United States, and they look like they've insisted that the U.S. signs virtually even before they leave the room, and they've done that. So there is no need to meet again for that kind of ceremony.
Professor Barakat, Fouad Azadi in London and Tehran. We got to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here.